is Israel an apartheid state? The core issue here is the question, is the Israeli military occupation a temporary phenomena, or is it here to stay? If the Israeli military occupation is a temporary phenomena, then we can forgive Israel for the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, it's ugly, it's cruel, it's contradicting the international law, but it is temporary. We Israelis were told from the beginning of the occupation in 1967 that occupying the West Bank and Gaza is a temporary phenomena. We just look for a partner, we just look for the opportunity, and we will return all the territories to the Palestinian people and we'll make peace with them. It's just a question of timing. We were misled by this for decades. The world is still misled by this for decades. I think after over 50 years of occupation, Amnesty, I salute to Amnesty and to the other organizations who did this step defining Israel as an apartheid state or defining the occupation as an apartheid. But I don't think that after 50 years of occupation, anyone can still claim that the occupation is temporary or that Israel has any kind of intention to put an end to it. With 700,000 settlers, including East Jerusalem, the numbers is growing, the settlements are just spreading more and more. Soon we will celebrate an anniversary to Oslo agreements. We are very grateful for this trap. It was a trap. I didn't think it was a trap at the time. I was, like most of the people in the world, I was sure we are going for a new era. But now, when it will be 30 years, I think, to Oslo, we can sum it up as another trap on the way to creating the second apartheid state in history after South Africa. If we come to the conclusion that the occupation is not temporary, and nobody can contradict this, nobody can seriously think that Israel has any kind of intention to put an end to the occupation. When you build settlements, you don't have any intention to evacuate them. When you oppress a people in such a brutal way, there is no indication that you have any kind of intention to get to any kind of agreement with these people. So in this situation, we have to realize, first of all, that we were cheated. The occupation never meant to come to its end. Israel never meant that the occupation is temporary. The occupation is here to stay. It was meant to be a permanent situation. And then the whole argument, is Israel an apartheid state or not, becomes almost anachronistic. How else can you call it? How else can you call it? I have my master's degree in political science. I don't know how to call a regime in which between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, there's not one point where Israelis and Palestinians are equal in one thing. And if they are not equal on national basis, it looks like apartheid, it walks like apartheid, it behaves like apartheid, it is apartheid. And I think this argument becomes really pathetic. You know, the occupation, the apartheid defines Israel. This does not mean that Israel is all along an apartheid regime. There are men who are beating their wives. There are others who are beating their children. They might be charming and nice and give money for charities, and do wonderful things. What defines them is what they do at night in their bedrooms and children's rooms. This defines them. They are violent people. They are beating their children or wives. When Israel is doing what it is doing to the Palestinian people, this defines Israel. All the rest cannot compete. Yes, Israel is a real liberal democracy for its Jewish citizens. I'm the best proof for it. I gain full freedom. I'm not sure that journalists today in Western Europe, in every country in Western Europe, gain the same freedom that I gain. I can really write whatever I want, from supporting BDS to claiming that Zionism is racism. Full freedom. But does this define Israel? No. What defines Israel is what it is doing in its backyard. And in its backyard, in its dark backyard, we are facing, and I'm very careful in what I say, but I stand behind it, in our backyard there is one of the most brutal totalitarian regimes in the world today. There are very few regimes which are as brutal, as cruel, and as totalitarian as the Israeli occupation. Not in terms of bloodshed, in terms of daily life. What the Palestinians are going through in the last 100 years, and especially in the last 52, 53 years, is something that cannot be described or cannot be perceived by none of us, because none of us lived under this reality. But take my word that it is a tyranny. And if Israel is possessing this tyranny in its backyard, we have to realize that Israel cannot be perceived as a democracy. With all the goodwill, with all the feeling that Israel had achieved many achievements, Israel is in many ways a miraculous phenomena. Out of the ashes, peoples from all over the world, refugees, Holocaust survivors, build something which is really incredible, unbelievable. But this does not cover up the fact that in the backyard there is this tyranny. And this tyranny cannot be defined in any other way but an apartheid system, because it is based on national discrimination. You don't like the word racist, it's okay. But finally it's about what religion and what nationality you are born to. Are you born Jewish, like me? I have all the privilege in the world. Are you born Palestinian? You have no privilege whatsoever, no rights whatsoever. I'll give you one example. Any Jew, as you know, the first law that Israel had legislate was the law of return. Any Jew in the world can arrive at any time in the Ben Gurion airport, declare that he wants to become citizens of Israel, and get the Israeli citizenship at the spot. He does not need anything but this. He gets the Israeli citizenship automatically. That's the first law of Israel. Fair enough, Israel was built as the state for the Jewish people after the Holocaust and so forth. Fair enough. It becomes even more dramatic when it is about saving Jews from all kinds of terrible regimes in the world. Israel is a shelter for the Jewish people. Wonderful, touching. There were a few thousand Ukrainian Jews who came now to Israel and got the citizenship. Very, very touching. But I know, for example, a painter in Haifa who lives for many generations in Haifa. He happened to be not Jewish, but he lives in Haifa much before we came to Haifa. His sister was living in the Yarmouk refugee camp in Syria. And when there was the war, his sister was born here in Israel. And her parents were born in Palestine, and her parents and grandparents and grandparents were born in Palestine. He wanted to rescue his sister from the Yarmouk camp. He is a full citizen of Israel. He is not in the occupied territories. He is an Israeli citizen. He can vote for the parliament. But he cannot bring his sister back to her homeland to rescue her life. He couldn't. She's not alive anymore. Because he is not Jewish. Give me one definition to this kind of regime in which one citizen can bring all his family and another citizen cannot rescue his sister who was born in Palestine and was expelled in 1948 in the Nakba. How else can we define it? Democracy, there is no equality here. How else can we define it? Come with me once to the Jordan Valley and look at the landscape. Thanks God, I didn't study law, so for me the legal considerations, which are very important, I'm not an expert about them, and I don't know how to define apartheid system from the legal point of view. For me, it's enough to go to the Jordan Valley and to see two villages, one next to the other. The one has all the resources, water in unlimited way, electricity, everything. The inhabitants of this village are voting next month, on the 1st of November, in 2 months, they are going to vote for the Israeli parliament. They are citizens of Israel, and they are voting for the government who will decide about their future. Next to this village, there's another village. They don't have electricity. They don't have water. The houses are demolished. And what is important more than anything else, they cannot vote for the government who decides about their fate, because Jerusalem decides about the fate of both villages. It's not that they have a different system. No, they are under the same system. So one village in front of the other. How can you define it if not as an apartheid? When the difference is only nationality and religion. As long as this was temporary, we could close our eyes, shut our mouths and say, okay, there is a solution, one day we will implement it. We misled the world with this fiction of the two-state solution. One day there will be two states. The Palestinians will have their own state. Israel will have, the Jewish people, the Jews in Israel will have their own state. And don't bother us now with apartheid, not apartheid, because soon we'll get to a solution. But now you cannot take it anymore. When the number of settlers ever since Oslo tripled, not doubled, but tripled, when they reached these figures of 700,000 settlers in the West Bank, the most powerful political power group in Israel, it is really not realistic to believe that anyone will evacuate them, ever. And if they will not be evacuated, there is no viable Palestinian state. And then we have to realize that we face a new phenomena. Now, it's not only about definition. It's also about the attitude of the international community. We have experience with this. The international community proved itself once facing the first apartheid state. The international community was very devoted, not in condemnations of the EU, in deeds, in acts. And the international community put an end to the apartheid system in South Africa. With all the respect to the struggle, there is a lot of respect to the struggle of the blacks and the the leadership of Nelson Mandela, it was finally in the international community with the actions it took, which brought an end to this apartheid system. And I know all the problems in South Africa today. It is a tough place, and still it's a more just place than it was 25 and 30 years ago. We have to realize it. So once we realize that it is an apartheid state, we have to ask what we, the international, you, not we, the international community is doing about it. Unlikely South Africa, Israel is the darling of the West. There's not one country in the world who had received so much military, economically, politically support from the West. First of all, from the United States, and obviously also from the EU. I don't know one country in the world who can ignore in such an arrogant way resolutions one after the other of the international community. We have tens and tens and tens of resolutions of any possible organ of the international community, and Israel just ignores it and doesn't pay any price. And that's maybe the core issue. Israel does not pay any price for its apartheid system. Nothing. Our life in Israel is wonderful. Israel is a blooming place. I mean, we have economically, politically, very, very comfortable life. The occupation is in our backyard. We totally live in denial with the occupation. Most of the Israelis know nothing about it and don't want to know anything about it. The media is collaborating with it and doesn't cover the occupation at all, and when it covers it with a very biased way. So don't expect Israelis to wake up one morning and say, oh, this apartheid system is not so kind and not so nice, and maybe it's also not very legal, let's put an end to it. It will not happen. It will never happen. Nobody will do it. What for? Why? Our life is good. We know nothing about what's going on in our backyard. We pay no price for it, not economically, not politically. Russia invades Crimea, and within weeks, the EU is putting sanctions on Russia, and mentioning sanctions on Israel, mentioning, not implementing them, just mentioning the possibility becomes illegal in many countries in the world today. There is a process in which any kind of call for action to put an end to this reality is criminalized in many countries, mainly in Europe and in the United States as well. You can't even mention it. You can't call for sanctions. You can't call for boycott. Israel, in a very sophisticated way, made this identification between any criticism on Israel and anti-Semitism. And Europe, what a shame, got paralyzed. Nobody dares to say a word, and therefore I said in the beginning of my talk that we are in one of the darkest moments, because today to criticize the occupation is almost violation of a law in many countries, and for sure is labeled as anti-Semitism. And you see the outcome. You see that the media doesn't dare anymore. What I can write in Haaretz, I think in many countries in Europe, no European journalist can write anymore. You see that Europe got paralyzed. The Palestinians are forgotten, bleeding on the side of the road without Who supports the Palestinians today? Who stands with them today? The Israeli peace camp was quite crashed. The Arab world lost interest and tries now a new strategy of going with Israel and ignoring the Palestinians. Europe has new issues: Ukraine, immigration, environment. The United States was never supporting the Palestinians, and they are left alone. They are divided like they have never been before. No leadership, no spirit of struggle, and I don't see how they can do anything about it. They tried everything. They tried violence, didn't lead them to anywhere. They tried peace talks and peace process, the longest peace process in history, didn't lead them to anywhere. Now they are trying the legal way, so they are accused as legal terrorists. There's a new term, legal terrorism. If you apply to the International Criminal Court in The Hague about crimes, you are a terrorist. That's the way Israel is. I'm sure that even Amnesty is labeled as a terror supporter, because calling Israel as an apartheid is supporting terror. So how do we get out? Because I will be kicked out from here in a second. How do we get out of all this? Because we need some hope. I will talk about it later in the panel. I just want to say one thing. We are now facing, as I said, one of the worst moments, but we shouldn't lose hope. The hope is the international community. The hope is to call the bluff of the temporary dimension of the occupation. The hope is that the international community will realize that they are facing another apartheid system. And the biggest hope is that the international community will be devoted enough and courageous enough and moral enough to use the same means that it used so efficiently vis-à-vis the first apartheid state, also vis-à-vis the second apartheid state. Thank you very much.